Strasbourg, 1518, a city teeming with life, yet burdened by hardship. The echoes of laughter and commerce mingled with the quiet desperation of a populace struggling to survive. Years of poor harvests had left their mark, etching worry onto faces and thinning the purses of even the most diligent merchants. The air hung thick with the scent of wood smoke and the ever-present fear of the unknown. It began unremarkably. In the narrow Rue des Juifs, Frau Trafia, a woman weathered by life's relentless challenges, found herself seized by an inexplicable urge. Her feet tapped, her arms swayed, and before she knew it, she was dancing. Not a joyful dance, but a frantic, uncontrolled gyration. At first the townsfolk watched with bemused curiosity. A lone woman dancing in the street. A strange sight, certainly, but not necessarily alarming. Children giggled, merchants paused in their transactions, and housewives peeked from their windows, exchanging knowing glances. But the amusement soon faded. Hours passed, and Frau Trafia continued to dance, her movements growing more frantic, her face contorted with a strange mix of exhaustion and fervor. It was no longer a dance of joy, but a desperate, relentless compulsion. Whispers of concern rippled through the crowd. Was she ill? Had she been cursed? Some tried to intervene, gently attempting to lead her away, but she remained locked in her frenzied dance, oblivious to their efforts. Then it happened. Another woman, seemingly caught by the same invisible force, joined Frau Trafia. The unease in the crowd deepened. This was no longer a singular oddity. Something far stranger was afoot. Word reached the city magistrates. Niklaus Leber, a man more accustomed to ledgers and land disputes than inexplicable phenomena, peered from the window of the city hall, his brow furrowed in consternation. Such public disturbances were bad for order, and order was essential for trade, and trade was the lifeblood of Strasbourg. By nightfall the dancing had spread. A dozen, then scores, were caught in the throes of the inexplicable jig. The streets, once filled with the sounds of daily life, now echoed with the rhythmic thud of feet and the ragged gasps of the afflicted. As darkness descended, the flickering light of lanterns cast long, distorted shadows, transforming the dancers into grotesque figures. Fear began to grip the city. Was this a punishment from God? A curse unleashed by witchcraft? The questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered and unsettling. The following morning, Niklaus Leber, acting on behalf of the city council, issued a proclamation. The dancing was to cease. Those afflicted were to return to their homes and pray for forgiveness. But the proclamation was met with vacant stares and relentless, rhythmic movement. It was a futile gesture. Days turned into weeks and the dancing persisted. Hundreds were now afflicted, their bodies pushed to the brink of collapse. The streets became a macabre dance floor, littered with the injured and exhausted. The city of Strasbourg held its breath, caught in the grip of a terrifying and inexplicable plague. Strasbourg was not just filled with dread, but it was also filled with confusion and disbelief. The once vibrant streets now echoed with a haunting silence, punctuated only by the shuffle of dancing feet. The nightmare had only just begun. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the Strasbourg marketplace into a furnace. Frau Trafia, now 3 days into her dance, showed no sign of stopping. Her initial fervor had devolved into a desperate, ragged motion. Each step was a struggle, each twitch a testament to her body's screaming protest. The contagion spread. What began as a solitary spectacle quickly blossomed into a disturbing phenomenon. Dozens now danced, their movements a grotesque parody of celebration. Some were young, some old, some healthy, some frail, but all were bound by the same invisible thread, pulled by the same relentless rhythm. Each dancer bore the marks of their ordeal, clothes ripped, feet bleeding, faces hollowed. Yet they danced on, driven by a force none could understand, a will that defied the limits of human endurance. The town magistrate, Niklaus Leber, watched with growing alarm. The dancing was disrupting trade, sowing fear and threatening the stability of Strasbourg. He knew he had to act, but he was paralyzed by the inexplicable nature of the event. Within the austere confines of the town hall, chaos reigned. Council members argued, each offering their own theories and solutions. Some spoke of divine wrath, others of demonic possession. A few cautiously suggested a natural, albeit unknown, cause. The city's physicians were baffled. Bloodletting proved ineffective. Herbal remedies offered no relief. The dancers seemed impervious to pain, their bodies driven by an invisible force that defied all medical understanding. Leber, a man of order and reason, felt the foundations of his world crumbling. He found himself questioning everything he believed, grappling with the possibility that something truly supernatural was at play. Even Frau Trophia, the catalyst of this strange epidemic, began to falter. Her body, pushed beyond its limits, threatened to give way entirely. Yet the dance persisted, a testament to the power of the affliction. In a desperate attempt to control the situation, Leber issued a decree. Musicians were to be hired day and night to provide accompaniment for the dancers, in the hope that the continuous music would eventually exhaust them. The music filled the air, a constant, maddening drone. But instead of tiring the dancers, it seemed to fuel their frenzy, driving them to even greater heights of exertion. Leber watched, his hopes dashed. The music had failed. The dancing continued, unabated, a terrifying testament to the limits of his authority and understanding. Death became a constant companion. The exhausted bodies of the dancers, unable to withstand the relentless strain, began to fail. Each passing marked another deepening of the shadow that had fallen over Strasbourg. The summer of 1518 brought more than just heat to Strasbourg. It carried whispers of a strange affliction, a relentless dance that gripped its victims. Into this maelstrom rode Paracelsus, a physician and alchemist driven by an insatiable curiosity and a belief in understanding the world through observation and reason. He'd heard tales of the dancing plague on his travels, dismissed them as peasant superstitions. But the sight that greeted him defied simple explanation. Men and women, young and old, swayed and leaped with a feverish energy, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion and a bizarre, unsettling joy. Paracelsus watched Frau Trophia, her face gaunt and sweat-streaked, her movements a grotesque parody of a dance. He noted the vacant look in her eyes, the twitching of her limbs, the sheer physical strain etched on her face. This was no mere performance. This was something far more sinister. He examined those who had collapsed, their bodies racked with exhaustion. Their pulses were rapid and erratic, their skin clammy. He questioned those who could still speak, but their answers were fragmented, filled with religious fervor and irrational fears. Paracelsus sought out local officials, attempting to glean any information. He learned of the rising panic, the desperate attempts to quell the dancing with music, the whispered rumors of divine wrath and demonic possession. Niklaus Leber, the local magistrate, met Paracelsus with a mixture of skepticism and desperation. The man was clearly overwhelmed, grasping at straws in the face of an inexplicable crisis. Paracelsus, refusing to accept the easy answers of superstition, began his own investigation. He collected samples of food, focusing on the rye bread that formed the staple diet of the townspeople. He suspected a physical cause, a hidden poison that could explain the madness. He immersed himself in the library's collection, searching for any mention of similar outbreaks, any clues that could shed light on the affliction. He read of ergot, a poisonous fungus that could contaminate rye and cause convulsions and hallucinations. Yet he couldn't dismiss the possibility of a psychological element. The people of Strasbourg were burdened by poverty, famine, and religious anxieties. Could their collective suffering have manifested in this bizarre, contagious dance? Paracelsus meticulously documented his observations, struggling to reconcile the physical and the psychological, the natural and the supernatural. He knew that the answer, whatever it might be, lay in understanding the complex interplay of these factors. As the dancing continued, the town authorities, desperate for a solution, announced new measures based on religious counsel, further fueling the anxieties of the populace. Paracelsus saw the futility in their approach, the dangerous consequences of ignoring the potential for a real, physical ailment. Paracelsus knew his work had only just begun. He was determined to find the truth behind the dancing plague, to offer a rational explanation in a world steeped in superstition. The fate of Strasbourg, he believed, might depend on it. The rhythmic thud of feet against cobblestone filled the air, a morbid symphony conducted by an unseen force. Paracelsus, a physician driven by both scientific curiosity and genuine compassion, watched the swirling mass of dancers. He sought a tangible cause, a physical ailment rather than a divine curse or mass hysteria. His mind kept returning to a darker possibility, ergot poisoning. Paracelsus ventured to the city's granary. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the gloom as he sifted through the stored rye. He was looking for the telltale signs of ergot, the purplish-black, elongated sclerotia of the claviceps purpurea fungus. His search was not in vain. Mixed amongst the healthy grains he found them, the unmistakable signs of ergot. These fungal growths, if ingested, could unleash a torrent of neurological and physical disturbances. He sought out local farmers, questioning them about the rye harvest. Had they noticed any unusual growths? Had the yield been poor? Were there any unexplained illnesses among their livestock? Their answers were vague, tinged with a mixture of fear and resignation. Bad harvests were common, and attributing blame was a dangerous game. Paracelsus considered the symptoms of ergotism. Convulsions, hallucinations, and contorted limbs, all could be explained by the potent alkaloids within the fungus. He watched Frau Trophia, her body racked with relentless movement. Was this a fit of religious ecstasy, or the agonizing dance of ergot poisoning? Ergotism, also known as St. Anthony's fire, was a well-known affliction. It could manifest in two forms: convulsive ergotism, marked by seizures and spasms, and gangrenous ergotism, where limbs blackened and died due to constricted blood flow. The dancing plague seemed to align more closely with the convulsive form, though the lack of reported gangrene offered a point of contention. He meticulously documented his observations, comparing the dancer's symptoms to existing medical texts on ergotism. He noted the discrepancies, the lack of widespread hallucinations, the seemingly voluntary nature of the dancing, at least initially. The pieces didn't quite fit. Niklaus Leber, the magistrate, remained skeptical. Ergotism affects individuals, he argued, his voice thick with impatience. Not entire crowds. This is the work of demons, a punishment for our sins. Paracelsus knew that convincing the authorities would be an uphill battle. Superstition ran deep. Another counterargument emerged. The dancers were not the only ones consuming the rye. Why weren't others exhibiting similar symptoms? Perhaps the concentration of ergot varied from loaf to loaf, or some individuals were simply more susceptible than others. Driven by his hypothesis, Paracelsus attempted to treat the dancers with remedies known to alleviate ergot poisoning. He prepared potions with herbs known to counteract the effects of toxins, meticulously documenting their effects. The results were inconclusive. The dancing continued unabated, a terrifying spectacle that defied easy explanation. The ergot hypothesis, while compelling, lacked definitive proof. It was a piece of the puzzle, perhaps, but not the whole picture. Paracelsus remained undeterred. The mystery of the dancing plague was far from solved. He knew that the truth, whatever it might be, lay buried beneath layers of superstition, fear, and the complex interplay of mind and body. He vowed to continue his search, driven by the unwavering belief that even the most inexplicable phenomena could be understood through careful observation and rational inquiry. The dancing plague tightened its grip on Strasbourg. As days bled into weeks, the initial bewilderment transformed into palpable fear. The inexplicable nature of the affliction fueled whispers of divine wrath and demonic influence, anxieties already simmering beneath the surface of the city's hardscrabble existence. Niklaus Leber, the magistrate, found himself caught between the growing panic of the populace and the limitations of his authority. He attempted to reassure the citizens, promising divine intervention and earthly remedies, yet his words rang hollow against the backdrop of the ceaseless dancing. Paracelsus, ever the keen observer, meticulously documented the symptoms and behaviors of the afflicted. He noted the uniformity of their movements, the glazed look in their eyes, and the way the dancing seemed to spread through suggestion, a physical manifestation of shared anxiety. The churches overflowed with supplicants, desperate to appease a God they believed had turned against them. Sermons focused on repentance, on purging the sins that had brought this plague upon the city. Flagellant processions became a common sight, the self-inflicted pain a desperate attempt to atone for collective transgressions. Frau Trophia, the initial catalyst, lay exhausted, her body ravaged by days of relentless dancing. Her mental state remained a mystery, a blank canvas onto which the fears and anxieties of Strasbourg were projected. Paracelsus, granted access to Frau Trophia, sought any physical ailment or sign of madness. He questioned her gently, attempting to uncover the trigger for her initial dance, but her responses were disjointed, fragmented recollections of unease and religious visions. The authorities, desperate to control the spread, doubled down on their initial strategy, hiring more musicians, hoping to cure the dancers through exhaustion. The music became a constant drone, a maddening accompaniment to the city's descent into hysteria. Political and religious leaders clashed over the correct interpretation of the events. The church saw it as divine punishment, the magistrate as a public order crisis. Their differing perspectives hampered any unified response. Fear, like the dancing, proved contagious. Rumors spread like wildfire, feeding the growing sense of unease. Accusations of witchcraft surfaced, targeting vulnerable members of the community, adding another layer of complexity to the unfolding tragedy. Paracelsus, amidst the chaos, retreated to his study, seeking answers in the ancient texts. He explored theories of humors, planetary influences, and the power of the mind, searching for a rational explanation for the seemingly irrational phenomenon. Frau Trophia remained in a catatonic state, a stark reminder of the destructive power of the collective psyche. Her individual experience, whatever its origin, had become inextricably linked to the mass hysteria that gripped Strasbourg. As the weeks passed, the dancing began to subside, not with a sudden halt but a gradual decline. Exhaustion, death, and perhaps a shift in the collective consciousness brought the plague to its eventual end, leaving behind a city scarred by fear and unanswered questions. The dancing intensified, and with it, the whispers turned to fervent pronouncements. Was this a sign from God, a punishment for the city's sins? Or was it the work of the devil, a demonic possession gripping the souls of Strasbourg? Niklaus Leber, desperate for answers, convened a meeting of the city's most influential clergy. The debate was heated, a clash between interpretations of Scripture and the terrifying reality unfolding in their streets. Some saw divine retribution, others demonic influence. In the cathedral, the faithful sought solace and intervention. Prayers filled the hallowed space, each word a desperate plea for deliverance from the unknown force that had gripped their city. Paracelsus remained skeptical of the religious explanations. He continued his observations, seeking a more tangible cause, a natural explanation for the unnatural phenomenon. The clergy organized public penances, hoping to appease God's wrath. Processions wound through the streets, filled with chanting and self-flagellation, a desperate attempt to purify the city. Whispers of witchcraft began to circulate, fueled by fear and ignorance. Some believed that the dancing plague was a curse, a malevolent spell cast upon the city by a vengeful witch. As days turned into weeks, the physical toll on the dancers became increasingly evident. Exhaustion claimed many, their bodies unable to endure the relentless movement. Desperate for a solution, Niklaus Leber pored over ancient texts, seeking any precedent, any clue that might explain the city's affliction. The fear of witchcraft led to accusations and trials. Innocent women were targeted, scapegoats for a city desperate to understand the inexplicable. While religious fervor gripped the city, Paracelsus continued his scientific investigation, searching for a tangible cause, a physical explanation for the dancing plague. A special mass was held, a final plea to God for mercy. The bishop himself led the service, his words carrying the weight of the city's hopes and fears. As the weeks passed, the dancing began to subside, slowly, reluctantly. Whether it was divine intervention, the exhaustion of the afflicted, or some other unknown factor, the dancing plague loosened its grip on Strasbourg, leaving behind a city scarred by fear and uncertainty. The desperation in Strasbourg reached fever pitch. Niklaus Leber, the magistrate, felt the weight of the city's despair pressing down on him. He knew he had to act, to be seen to be doing something, anything, to quell the rising panic. Consulting with his advisors, a desperate plan was hatched: music. The town square transformed into a macabre stage. Frau Trophia, seemingly oblivious to the world around her, continued her relentless dance. Others joined her, their movements mirroring her frantic energy, a terrifying ballet of affliction. The musicians, hired at great expense, began to play. A lively tune, intended to soothe and exhaust the dancers, filled the square. The magistrate hoped the music would provide some relief, a controlled outlet for the uncontrollable energy consuming the city. But the music had an unexpected effect. Instead of calming the dancers, it seemed to fuel their frenzy. Their movements became more erratic, more desperate. Some collapsed, their bodies unable to endure the strain, but others surged forward, driven by an unseen force. Paracelsus observed the spectacle with a growing sense of unease. The music, intended as a cure, was clearly exacerbating the problem. He shook his head, realizing the authorities were grasping at straws, applying remedies without understanding the underlying cause. Magistrate Leber watched in dismay as his plan backfired. The music, rather than alleviating the crisis, had amplified it. He wrung his hands, feeling the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. He needed a new approach, a more practical solution. In a fit of desperation, guards began attempting to physically restrain the dancers, pulling them from the throng. But their efforts were largely futile. For every dancer they managed to subdue, two more seemed to take their place. Paracelsus, witnessing the ineffectiveness and potential harm of the current approach, pushed his way through the throng towards Leber. He had to speak, to offer a different perspective, even if it was unwelcome. Leber, his face etched with frustration, listened with ill-concealed impatience as Paracelsus spoke. The magistrate was wary of the young physician's unorthodox methods, but he was desperate for any solution that might bring an end to the madness. Reluctantly, Leber conceded. He raised his hand, signaling to the musicians. With a final, discordant flourish, the music ceased. A brief, almost imperceptible silence fell over the square, broken only by the ragged breathing of the dancers. But even without the music, the dancing continued. Frau Trophia and the others seemed locked in their trance, their bodies moving to a rhythm only they could hear. The silence only amplified the unsettling nature of their movements. Leber stood in the eerie silence, the sight of the still dancing figures a stark reminder of his failure. The music cure had failed. He needed a new plan, a more practical approach, before the dancing consumed the city entirely. Paracelsus arrived in Strasbourg with a bold pronouncement. The dancing plague was neither divine punishment nor demonic possession, but a malady of the mind and body intertwined. He sought an audience with Niklaus Leber, the magistrate, determined to offer a different perspective. Niklaus Leber, burdened by the relentless crisis, listened with a mixture of hope and skepticism. He had already consulted priests and scholars, to little avail. This young physician's unconventional theories seemed a long shot, but he was willing to consider any possibility that might save his city. Paracelsus began his investigation by observing Frau Trophia. He noted her physical exhaustion, but also her persistent, vacant gaze. He spoke to her gently, inquiring about her worries, her fears, and her state of mind before the dancing began. Frau Trophia, exhausted and bewildered, spoke of her anxieties, the ever-present threat of poverty, the fear of losing her husband, and the oppressive religious fervor that gripped the city. Paracelsus listened intently, piecing together a picture of a woman on the brink. Based on his observations, Paracelsus prepared herbal remedies, concoctions designed to soothe the mind and calm the nerves. He believed that restoring balance to the body's humors would alleviate the dancing. Frau Trophia dutifully took the remedies, clinging to the hope that they would bring her relief. She also participated in the talking cure that Paracelsus prescribed, sharing her fears and anxieties in a way she never had before. Paracelsus extended his approach to other dancers, spending hours listening to their stories, offering comfort, and prescribing his herbal remedies. He sought to understand the unique circumstances that had led each of them to this state. Despite Paracelsus's efforts, the dancing continued. Some dancers found temporary relief from his remedies, but the underlying compulsion remained. The plague seemed to have a life of its own, resisting any attempts to control it. Nicolaus Leber observed Paracelsus's work with growing unease. While he admired the physician's dedication, he saw little tangible progress. The dancing persisted, and the death toll continued to rise. Paracelsus, though disheartened by the limited success, refused to abandon his approach. He believed that understanding the individual's mental and emotional state was crucial, even if it didn't provide a complete solution. The townspeople, witnessing the persistence of the dancing and the failure of conventional remedies, began to lose hope. Even the musicians hired to dance the plague away seemed to play with a sense of resignation. As night fell, Paracelsus retreated to his laboratory, determined to continue his search for answers. He knew that the dancing plague was a complex phenomenon, and that a true understanding would require a deeper exploration of the human mind and body. A hesitant dawn broke over Strasbourg. The relentless rhythm that had consumed the city began to falter. The town crier announced a day with no new dancers reported, a fragile hope amidst the exhaustion. Exhaustion etched itself onto Frau Trofia's face, a stark reminder of the ordeal. The relentless dance had stolen her strength, leaving behind only a shell of her former self. She sought solace in prayer, a desperate plea for peace. Inside homes across Strasbourg, families nursed their afflicted. The dancing had ceased for many, but the recovery was slow and arduous. Weakened bodies and shattered spirits were the plague's grim legacy. Paracelsus continued his rounds, tending to the sick and weary. He observed the decline in new cases with cautious optimism, though the underlying cause remained elusive. He meticulously recorded his observations, seeking patterns and clues. Nicolaus Leber, the magistrate, felt a sense of relief mixed with lingering unease. The city was slowly returning to normal, but the trauma remained. He pondered the economic impact of the plague, the disruption to trade and agriculture. The rye harvest approached, and farmers eyed their fields with apprehension. The possibility of ergot contamination lingered, a silent threat to the city's food supply and future stability. Some crops were clearly affected, showing the telltale signs of the fungus. The marketplace, once a vibrant hub of activity, struggled to regain its former energy. People went about their business, but the recent tragedy had cast a long shadow. Trust had been eroded, replaced by a palpable anxiety. Paracelsus convened with local scholars, sharing his observations and hypotheses. He spoke of the power of the mind, the influence of social conditions, and the potential role of environmental factors. The true cause remained elusive, a complex puzzle with many missing pieces. The church sought to provide solace and meaning in the wake of the dancing plague. Religious processions filled the streets, offering prayers for forgiveness and healing. The faithful sought refuge in their beliefs, clinging to hope in the face of the inexplicable. Nicolaus Leber focused on rebuilding the city's infrastructure and ensuring the food supply. He organized the distribution of grain, attempting to alleviate the suffering of the most vulnerable. The road to recovery would be long and arduous. Frau Trofia, though physically recovered, carried the invisible scars of the dancing plague. She walked through the marketplace, a silent observer of a city forever changed. The memory of the dance would forever haunt her steps. The dancing plague of 1518 slowly faded into memory, a haunting chapter in Strasbourg's history. The city, scarred but not broken, stood as a testament to the enduring spirit of its people. The mystery of the dancing plague remained, a timeless enigma for future generations to ponder. The dancing had stopped, or rather, dwindled to a mere echo. The city of Strasbourg, battered and bruised, began the arduous task of piecing itself back together. But the questions remained, hanging heavy in the air like the scent of wood smoke and unwashed bodies. Paracelsus prepared to depart, his mind a whirlwind of observations and unanswered questions. Ergot, mass hysteria, a combination of factors fueled by the city's deep-seated anxieties. He scribbled notes in his journal, knowing that the true cause remained elusive, a frustrating enigma. Niklaus Leber, the magistrate, surveyed the chaos of his office. The dancing had ceased, but its wake was a sea of bureaucratic nightmares. He had failed to quell the outbreak, had perhaps even exacerbated it with his ill-conceived solutions. He knew his reputation was in tatters, his authority diminished. Frau Trophia, the unwitting catalyst, sat in quiet contemplation. The dancing was over, her body ached, but the memories remained vivid and unsettling. Had she been possessed, driven mad by grief, or simply caught in the tide of something she couldn't understand? The theory of mass psychogenic illness lingered in Paracelsus's mind. The stressors of life in Strasbourg, poverty, disease, social unrest, could have created a fertile ground for collective hysteria. The power of suggestion, amplified by religious fervor, might have unlocked a shared delusion. Yet the possibility of ergot poisoning could not be dismissed. The fungus Claviceps purpurea, lurking within the rye, could have unleashed a torrent of neurological chaos. The hallucinations, the convulsions, the altered states of consciousness, all aligned with the known effects of ergotism. For many, the dancing plague remained a divine mystery, a punishment for sins or a test of faith. The religious fervor of the time, the fear of witchcraft and demonic influence, provided a framework for understanding the inexplicable. The Church offered solace, but also reinforced the belief in supernatural forces. Leber struggled to regain control. He implemented new regulations, tightened security, and attempted to project an image of strength. But the trust was broken, the wounds too deep. He was a magistrate adrift in a sea of uncertainty, his authority undermined by the inexplicable. Frau Trophia found herself an object of curiosity and fear. Some whispered that she was cursed, others that she was blessed. She sought solace in prayer, but the answers remained elusive. The dancing had changed her, leaving her with a sense of unease and a lingering question: why me? Centuries later, historians and scientists would dissect the events of 1518, poring over documents, analyzing data and constructing theories. Mass hysteria, ergot poisoning, religious fervor, each explanation offered a piece of the puzzle, but none could fully capture the complexity of the event. The dancing plague of 1518 remains an enduring enigma, a testament to the power of collective behavior, the influence of social and economic hardship, and the limitations of scientific knowledge. It serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of the human mind and the enduring mysteries that lie at the heart of our existence. And so, the tale of the dancing plague fades into the annals of history, a haunting melody that continues to resonate across the centuries, a reminder that even in the age of reason, the irrational can still take hold, and the human spirit remains a force both powerful and unpredictable.